What's happening? What's happening? What's going on? Part of my presence YouTube channel. I want to discuss a few things, a few headlines for this past week, and kind of bring everything back into a overall message that I want to give in this video. Okay, it won't be too long, but I want to discuss a few things because I always talk about the music industry and the smoke and mirrors and all of the misleading articles and headlines that are put out to create either a story, a false story, to create an image, to sell advertising, to get clicks, clickbait, all that stuff. And there's a lot of negative factors, a lot of negative outcomes as a result of these fake stories. So I just want to go through a couple of them, okay? The first one I want to go over has to do with the whole Rory and Mal and Joe Budden split. If you guys remember back in, I think it was in April or May, Joe Budden fired RoryMal on air. It was a big whole event within the podcast industry. Okay, now RoryMal have taken to their own YouTube platform and kind of did like an underground podcast for about maybe 2 or 3 months. They gained momentum, and then all of a sudden, sometime at the end of October or mid-October rather, they announced that they were able to work out a deal with Sirius Radio. So they've signed some type of deal, some type of podcast deal with Sirius Radio, and they're going to have a podcast twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I believe, or maybe it was Friday. I'm not too sure. It's always a day before Joe Budden's podcast, so I guess it'll be the Tuesdays and then the Fridays. I'm sure they did it purposely to kind of get a one up on Joe, but they announced that, and it was announced by an article that made its rounds where they're talking about the whole situation and the split and how they had creative differences, how they felt stifled, also how they felt that they were being ripped off as far as the finances and the financial success of Joe Biden's show, and they felt that they had more to do with it as far as to gain financially, right? Now, the interesting thing about it is that in that initial interview, it was never discussed or disclosed the amount the deal was for, or the details as far as how much they got in the deal, how long the deal is for, and the contracts and the particulars. That was never discussed within that particular article. However, maybe about 2 or 3 hours later, certain articles came out on the blogs, stuff like allhiphop.com, Hip Hop DX, The Root, and all the Black Gossip blogs, all those other different places, which, funny, if you believe it or not, those have become the go-to places to get your news. MTO, the Shade Room, all of those, what used to be, I guess you would say, not credible sources, have now become the norm and the go-to places to get credible information. So it's crazy how things have changed. But what's happened is that there were a few articles that came out afterwards that kind of took over the initial headline, which was RoryMal announced a new deal with Sirius Satellite Radio or Sirius Podcasting. The new headline was RoryMal got the bag, inked a deal with Sirius for a $10 million deal. That's what it said. So they inked a deal worth $10 million, and how it goes to show you how sticking together and going on your own pay it off, and the fact that they're sticking it to Joe Budden, and the fact that they're not down and out, and they have talent on their own. They were able to beat the David and Goliath story, and they're able to beat the giant and go off their own and do something big. That was how it was categorized. Now, the funny thing about these headlines that came out is, where did they get that information from? Because it was never released in the original article when they did the press release of them getting the deal, because the deal details were never disclosed. Come to find out, that information, the $10 million detail, it came from an Instagram post. Yes, an Instagram post by Mal's half-brother, Kareem Biggs Burke. And if you don't know who Kareem Biggs Burke is, he was one of the co-founders of Rockefeller Records with Dame Dash and Jay-Z. Uh, so he's someone who has, a notable reputation. But he put out a IG post, I believe it was a story, if I'm not mistaken, that said, "This is what a fresh 10 million looks like." And he put it beside a picture of Rory and Mal when this initial article came out. And that is what all the blog sites and all the hip hop news sites and everybody else, that's what they took from that, and they made it into a legitimate article saying Rory and Mal got $10 million. Right? Now, if you're someone who's a critical thinker, if you're someone who likes to inquire and to ask the second, third, fourth, and fifth questions and likes to dive deeper, you're gonna think, you know what? How can we go based on that particular IG post? Because when you look at how it's worded, he said, "This is what a fresh 10 mil looks like." He never said, "Congratulations on your $10 million deal." He never said, "You guys just got $10 million. Congrats." He never said anything other than, "This is what $10 million looks like." So, again, if you understand English, you understand the wording of things, if you understand how things have to be done in a way that is either legal if it's factual, or it could be innuendo if it's not factual, it could be a play on words, things that are not direct, you can tell this is just innuendo. You can tell this is just BS. This is just posturing for social media. And people ran with it. They ran with it, posted all up. The forums were talking shit. A lot of people were shitting on Joe Budden and their podcast and how they're failing. And people never questioned whether or not the source was accurate, whether or not the source is even a credible source, right? Or whether or not the details are legitimate or not. Because think about it. If they got 10 million, the other podcasts who, I think it was Call Her Daddy, which is one of the female podcasts that's big, she got, I think it was 30 million or 50 million for an exclusive deal. Then I believe Joe Budden got, I think it was, I'm not sure what his amount was, but his amount wasn't that much higher. I think it was no more than 80 mil. And I think Joe Rogan got 100 mil. So I can see, when you look at all of the podcasts in that industry, I don't see Rory and Mal jumping into a deal with Sirius for 10 million. And I definitely don't see how they can get 10 million if the deal is not exclusive. Because when they announced this whole thing, they said, we're still going to be on all digital platforms. We're still going to have 100% ownership. Those are all the things that they touted as far as the deal, and that's all they gave directly. But I can't see how you can get $10 million for a podcast deal that is not exclusive, because the Joe Budden deal was exclusive with Spotify. The Joe Rogan deal is exclusive with Joe Rogan. So if you're going to get the big bucks, and if you're going to retain 100% ownership, then these conglomerates, these corporations are going to want something in return. And that's usually the exclusivity. So that way they can sell the most amount of money for the ad dollars, or get the most amount of money for their ad dollars, and charge enormous rates for their ads, because you can only go to their platform to watch these shows. So you have a captive audience. But that is not how this was communicated. And this is why I want to get into this particular clip right now that I'll play for you.
A little bit of a beef with your brother.
Why? What happened?
Appreciate everything that he's done for us, more than he knows.
Mm-hmm.
But to make the world think that I have $10 million has added quite an inconvenience to my life.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Dog, the movers went to my fucking storage unit. 3 of them come out, hey, $10 million. I'm like,
yeah.
No.
And not only that, they feel like you got it on you cash.
Of course,
like right
yeah.
now.
Right here. Stitcher
Them
was
not
like,
in
yo,
your
yo,
pocket.
yo,
Yeah.
here's 10 mil.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I get it. I understand. He was just he was more so happy for us though.
Oh, I know he was.
You know
I
what I mean?
appreciate
It was
it.
he was happy for us. He was excited, and you know, it was like we had put in all this work behind the scenes and with the team and everybody. So, you know, but he hit me before he sent it out.
Oh, so this is your fault.
I said, yeah, I don't care.
Okay.
Put it out.
I would have cared.
So as you can see by their own admission that this story about the $10 million deal was a fabricated story. It was completely false. There was no substance to it whatsoever. There was no validity to it whatsoever, but they let it ride. They let it spread throughout social media. And you heard Mal say himself, he came to me, Biggs, his brother, came to me first to get the okay. And I said, go ahead. So in other words, all of these guys were in on it. They purposely put out false information. Why? Because they wanted to get the headlines, they wanted to get the attention, they wanted to make sure that it gets spread out there for everyone to see, because they wanted people to hate. They didn't really care about the congratulations. All that's great, but they wanted people to hate. And I believe they did that specifically to get under Joe Budden's skin. That's my opinion, but I'll digress from that. But here's the issue with this, is that everybody else is seeing this. You got guys doing 9 to 5s. You got guys working overtime, 80 hours a week. You got the women on social media seeing this. $10 million for talking for 2 hours, twice a day? What's my man doing? He ain't doing shit working 80 hours a day and bringing not nearly any amount close to that. People are seeing this and they're thinking that this is real life. People are seeing this and thinking, yeah, companies are giving out $10 million. When it's not true. And this is something that happens a lot within the hip hop industry and the music industry, especially when it comes to things attached to black culture. They keep trying to push this narrative that all of these guys are well paid, handsomely paid, millionaires, that these guys are rich, that they're able to finagle all of this cash from all these corporations. Meanwhile, think about it. If they were really paying Rory or Mal $10 million, that means they must be making 50 or 60, 70, 80 million dollars from them. Do you really see that? Do you really see those two guys being able to produce that much money in content and ad dollars? No. No, not by a long shot. So then the question that remains is, why do they do it? Because attention sells. Attention gets the captive audience. Attention gets that specific demographic that they're looking for. Ages between, I think it's 18 to 24, or even nowadays, 12 to 24, or anywhere between 12 and 34. That is the demographic that they're looking for, and that is who they're trying to get to tune in, because they want to sell products. They want to push the marketing and advertising. They want to increase their ad rate to get the ad dollars. That is what this is about. And all of these people are co-conspirators because they all work hand in hand. You put out this bullshit story, you feed it to all these blogs, the blogs push it, push it, push it. The more it's out there, it becomes the truth. It becomes the word. It becomes fodder for the day that everybody talks about. No one ever hears the retraction. All they see is the headline. People don't even read the body of our article. All they read is the headline and they move forward. So by putting out that false statement from a bullshit IG post, you are misleading the public, and it's creating a lot of issues within normal people's households. And don't get it twisted, stories like this about people getting 10 mil can really ruin relationships and end marriages, put strain on people, cause people to have issues with self-esteem, feeling inadequate. And I'm not sure if people are aware about it, but the more you feel inadequate, the lower your self-esteem is, the more you're searching for validation externally instead of internally. Do you know what it's been found that people do when they're in that state? They spend money. They need to buy things. They need to feel whole again, to fulfill themselves in other ways. And they spend, spend, spend. And this is what a lot of this is all about. How can we get people to spend money, either through the advertising that we're going to sell them, or by creating this philosophy in their minds or a mentality where they need to buy something and to consume something in order to feel better about themselves because of these stories that are constantly put in people's faces. No matter how untrue they are, no matter how much they embellish on the details, the point is it makes people want to do more, want to spend more, want to consume more in order to catch up and keep up with everybody else. Because now you have people thinking that $10 million is so attainable, and why we can't attain $10 million, and why we are only making $50,000 or $60,000 or $80,000. Meanwhile, you're living better than the average household within certain countries, right? Or why my man makes 60 and I make 60, and why I feel poor. Meanwhile, both of you together under one roof, you're making 120, you're middle class. But you think you're broke. You're ready to leave your partner and go out and get somebody else. You're ready to run scams, risk your freedom, just so you could buy all of these Birkin bags that you know are way outside your budget. Because you try to compete with a RoryMal. But that version, that $10 million version of RoryMal doesn't exist. And this is what people need to understand and get through their heads. It's all smoke and mirrors. None of these guys are rich. These guys are working hard just like you. They got bills to pay just like you. But the one thing that keeps them apart from you, the one thing that makes them different from you all, myself included, is the fact that they are in show business. And in show business, their job is to fool you into believing that there is a dream that you could buy into, to fool you to think that this is something that could be attainable. And don't get me wrong, you can attain it. But they sell it to you in a way where it's normalized. When a $10 million deal for talking for 2 hours a week or twice a week is not something that the average podcaster could do or could claim to do. They don't make that much money. So keep that in mind. Now, I could even go into the whole story about Joe Budden saying that he's bisexual, because that's the news story that came out just yesterday. Joe Budden comes out as bisexual. Meanwhile, it was a joke that he had in his podcast, because Joe's been doing that bullshit for quite some time, joking about his sexuality. I don't know why he's doing it. Well, I do know why, but it's an old running joke. He's trying to gain favor within the LGBT community, but I don't know why he needs to keep doing this, but he does it. But as a result of him being sarcastic, those same blogs that put out the story about RoryMal getting 10 million ran with the story that Joe Budden is bisexual. And again, like I said, people eat it up. And people start to believe it. And it becomes an echo chamber where people keep talking about it, talking about it, talking about it. And before you know it, it becomes a fact. It becomes real. Not because it is real, but it's because enough people said it. And if enough people talk about it, if it's trending on Twitter, if it's trending on IG, if it's trending on social media, then it must be true. So these are the pitfalls that you, as a regular person, the 9 to 5er, the mother, the father, the wife, and the husband, the hard worker, these are pitfalls and the gimmicks that you need to recognize and be able to discern what's bullshit and be able to separate from what's real and what's fake. Now, I won't go any more into this, just to make this a brief video, but I just wanted to point that out for you guys, to see the hypocrisy, to see the smoke and mirrors and the lies that are put out there in social media. And don't get me started on the Forbes list, because that Forbes list is fugazi as well too, because the real millionaires, the real billionaires, you don't even know who they are. You won't. You won't. And those people who are on that list, a lot of them, they pay for their spots. But I'll let that be. I'll leave it for another time. But that's all I wanted to talk about in regards to this whole BS and the stories that are put out there with false narratives to push onto everybody else in regards to Rory and Mal. But again, at the end of this all, you can see for yourself. Rory and Mal lied. They did not make $10 million. They did not sign a deal with Sirius for $10 million. Their podcast ain't worth $10 million. So let that sink in and understand how the game is being played, and don't get fooled by it. And until next time, part of my presence, like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts on this particular situation. Until next time, next move, best move. Peace.